At once I was thrown in with a gang of the toughest kind of men in the world. The only thing that America ever had that would compete with these fellows was the canalers in the early days of the country. I'm told these were the toughest, craziest, fightingest breed ever produced in the States. A sheep shearer, after he clipped the wool off 250 sheep, was hungry enough to eat it. These fellows hired their own cooks. If the cooks didn't come up with the right stuff, God help them. It was probably the last job they ever had and the last teeth in their mouths. I was the newest man and had to begin at the bottom of the sheep itself, literally. I was one of 4 men in a line, an assembly belt for sheep shearing. The first man took the young hogget, as a young lamb was called, and he had to dag him, that is, he must get rid of the blue bottle flies and all the accumulated etc. around the table. This he did by holding the sheep in his left hand, and in his right hand he went in and dagged the sheep. He grabbed a handful of the sheep's shit, tossed it aside, and passed the sheep on to the next man to him. The next man was me. All I had to do was stick my face into the gruesome mess and bite off the young sheep's testicles. Dag a hogget, I had good teeth. I put my nose into this awful smelling mess, my teeth solidly around the balls of the 6-month-old sheep, and took a bite while I held him upside down. My nose was in fur and odor. I bit and spat out the product into a pile of what they called prairie oysters. We have them in America, too. Delicious to eat, but not delicious to remove. They said this was the most sanitary way to deball a sheep. After I was done, I passed the sheep on to the next man, who put a little coal tar on the same spot for purposes of cleaning and closing up the wound. The sheep never let out a bleat. You bit, you spat out something like a couple of olives and passed it on. Every day I had my proportion of oysters. That blue bottle flies all over me. The blue bottle flies all over me. At the end of the day, I was dripping with blood and sheep's odor, smelling like, well, there's nothing after that to compare it with. I was getting big money, £6 a week and keep. But my jaws started to freeze up, and I never did get a chance to herd sheep to the coast. The cards fell so fast. Mr. Jack's 2 daughters were coming back from Townsville. The ranch hands were excited. They talked about how attractive the girls were. Both were at school. One was well advanced in a university. They were coming home to Papa and the sheep drivers. The word couldn't have been truer. They were lovely. 2 beauties right in the middle of the vast Australian desert. On the evening of their arrival, I cleaned up. I scrubbed all the sheep odor off my face, got the smell of the hogget off my thighs, soaked my hands in an excess of soap, prettied myself up as much as I could, and managed to make my appearance unobtrusively but inevitably before the 2 young ladies. The older one, Aline, caught my eye, and I caught as much of her as I could. She asked me what I was doing on her father's ranch. I'm dagging the hogget. How awful. I'll ask Father to put you on something else. Father hardly had time to take me off sheep's nuts. Aline and I had a swift and flourishing courtship. The unexpected happened. Why this should have been unexpected for me, or now, I don't know. I was in bed with Aline when Mr. Jack discovered us. He let out a bellow of rage and ran to another building for his shotgun. "Goodbye, darling," I murmured frantically, slipping into my pants, feeling the sewn-up back pocket which contained my shaving brush handle filled with the borrowed, so to speak, diamonds, grabbed a shirt, and ran out as fast as I could. I raced in the direction away from the building where I saw Mr. Jack headed. I ran, and while ordinarily I couldn't go as fast as a horse, This one time I did. Faster. I continued to hear the gallop of horses' hooves behind me for some time. I just kept going. I broke all Olympic records, but had no official scorer, not even my conscience. For 5.5 days, I went on foot across that god-awful desert country. Again, I had little or nothing to eat. Occasionally, I found water at a well under saltbush. My feet were burned. My shoes were torn to shreds in the hot sands of the Queensland desert. I had no money, but for once I didn't need it. I reached a railroad siding. There, I waited for a train to come along that might take me to Townsville on the coast. I waited all one day. At last, along came one of those funny little old Australian trains, this one carrying cattle. The tracks ran uphill, and the trains would slow down or come to a stop altogether, I figured. I leaped on. As I had no hat, I decided against going up on the roof to ride in the blazing hot Queensland sun. I squeezed in among the cattle, in a corner of the car with a cow's flanks up against me and a lot of cow's shit all over. I hung on to the wooden bars. I might comment that a cow's arse is a little different from a sheep's. Just larger. Every once in a while, a cow's tail switched around and caught me in the face. They mooed, they shat, they pushed against each other. They resented me, and I resented them. But we were both non-paying passengers, with no right to complain, and I was happy to be on my way. All went fine till I was about a day's ride from Townsville. The train stopped to take water, and the station dick found me and kicked me off. Lost in this little spot of nowhere, I went into the only establishment that there was, a pub, a ramshackle place that passed as an eatery and hotel. Once more, a kindly female took pity on me. I presumed that even then my face and form were some kind of fortune. I must have known it, for apparently in times of distress I gravitated to females, who were more likely to be kind to me than men, I was learning. This time it was Sheila, the daughter of the hotel keeper. I got around by the back door, and she passed out plates of food to me, secretly. I thanked her as well as I was able, secretly. I had nothing else to give her except my devotion and some embraces. I was generous, however. It wasn't hard to be. She was blonde and lusty. I lay in wait for the next train a day or two, carrying on this fretful fancy with Sheila, not wasting time. The train I needed came along, and I bade a passionate but weaker farewell to the young lady. The damned contraption came flying down the hill twice as fast as the train I had been thrown off. It looked too fast for me, but it was now or never, and I had to make it. I took a flying jump, grabbed a hold of an iron bar that jutted out from a door and managed to get on, clawing to the side and holding on like a fly on a wall while the train barreled on. The doors opened outward. I couldn't get in, only hang on to these steel fixtures and feel the earth tearing beneath me, hear the wheels clatter, and get drafts of smoke into my nostrils from the locomotive up ahead. This went on and on till I was dizzy. I couldn't hold out much longer. My gripped fingers told me. As the train moved into a station, going slower, the trainman on the inside flung open the door. I was knocked off the train. I rolled around on the earth a minute and picked myself up. Luckily, the train wasn't moving too fast then. It halted. I took a chance. I went up to the trainman. "Listen, Digger," I said. Digger is the Australian equivalent of buddy. "I'm very hungry, very thirsty, and my feet have had it. Can I catch a ride?" He eyed me. "Why, sure, come on in. Like some booze?" "No booze, sir, but if you've got a drink of plain water." "You look as hungry as a desert rat in a desert drought." "Get on." He looked around nervously. "Get on fast." This nice guy, it is amazing how many there are in the world, gave me the first orange I saw in God knows how long, as well as a Dagwood sandwich about 3 inches thick. He shared his big lunchbox with me, and I ate till I felt nearly sick. I rode with this fellow as far as Townsville and told him I was headed for the goldfields. If I have any luck, sport, I won't forget you ever. Thanks. Townsville. This was a sprawling and pleasant city in Queensland. I had been there before, when the Sirocco held over in the Townsville port. I had stayed at Her Majesty's Hotel, and I hoped they'd remembered that I'd been there. I headed for the nearest latrine to clean myself up and wash as well as I could. My shirt looked awful, my pants worse. But it's no use if you look like a bum going into the worst hotel. That was my policy. Always go to the best. The odds are better. I put on my boldest front, but they did not recall me. I sprang a long story of getting caught in a desert typhoon, getting separated from my horses, and having to walk many miles. I had swum a river, foot-slogged it, not knowing where I was, and a whole pack of other lies, which sounded to me fairly convincing. I had actually swum a river, done plenty of walking for sure, and had some hard train riding, but I had to make this strong. I would like a room, I said, and would they send off some cables? I cabled 2 people in New Guinea, Jack Ryan and Mrs. Giblin. I chewed on fingernails for 2 days before I got replies. Both sent money. I heaved a big sigh of relief. I wouldn't have to be a fugitive again, and possibly have to jump out of a hotel window at night. Mrs. Giblin wired back the most startling news. I had won half of a gold claim. In the gold fields in New Guinea, the government had several ancient administration buildings where officials issued licenses, certified claims, handled all civil and legal affairs. They built these structures right next to one of the richest claims thereabouts. The claims underneath the government buildings were put up for ballot about 300 registered miners. I was one of these, and I now learned that my partner, Mrs. Giblin, and I had won the claim. Right smack in the middle of the gold field, she and I won the claim that had been voted on. A 300 to 1 chance. Flynn luck. I'd be rich again. Couldn't fail. The veins of gold couldn't run out. In the money, boy. This is it. Once more, I was aboard a boat. So much of my time was spent on these Australian and New Guinea waters, it seemed, as I tried to make a fortune. The dream of England was heavy upon me now. As usual, all I needed was money. Go to England big style, plush it up at a fine hotel, and start living it up. I sailed for days to Salamaua, the port that led to the goldfields, and arrived feeling a little like Diamond Jim Brady. At the pier, Mrs. Giblin, a woman of 55, met me. So did her husband, the doctor. All of us jigged around on the pier like a ballet troupe, only less gracefully, and sang Papoun songs. She would finance an expedition to go and to do the mining. I would try to get the Kanakas and direct the operations. We'd split whatever we found 50-50. I no longer had worries about credit. I could get anything I wanted. Recruiting equipment, clothes, food, anything. But how was I to get the labor to start working the claim? Without Kanakas to do the hard work, it couldn't be done. I needed about 20 natives, and in a big hurry. All over New Guinea, by now, they had learned to distrust us prospectors. It was known that many natives who went to the fields died swiftly of pneumonia or TB. The gold fields were high. The warm-weathered, conditioned natives couldn't take the climate. They'd go do plantation work along the coasts, copra and other crops, but nothing doing on the long, high trek inland. True, the recruiters often took these Kanakas into virtual slavery. It was called indentured labor, but it was worse than that once they signed up and got away from their towns. Being a kindly man, I think, I always saw to my boys being well treated. I saw that they had rice and meat and other foods, and they never had in their villages. That they never had in their villages. But many recruiters were rougher and tougher, and the young natives never saw their villages again. Back in these home Back in these home villages, they figured, our men have been taken away and eaten. So that after a time, recruiters faced this problem everywhere and couldn't get labor. In the jungle, where the natives had taken on some of the white customs, they didn't use paper money. The only acceptable legal tender was the English shilling. Traveling through the land, you carried a 5-pound fuse, a long package containing 100 shillings. With these, you paid as you went along for food, lodging, articles, whatever. The only other way you traded was with barter items like colored beads, axes, cutlasses. Razor blades came high. It happened that the English halfpenny, usually called vernacularly a halfpenny, was the same size as a shilling. This gave me an idea. I wanted to get some of the natives who had been touched by just a little bit of missionary influence, just enough to make them know what money was. I knew how dangerous was a little knowledge, and I was looking for natives with just the right amount of it, but not too much of it. I thought I knew about where these could be found. A little below Salamaua was Finchhaven Harbor. Catholic missionaries lived there. I didn't want them to know what I was up to, but I had to operate out of that place. First, I went to the W.R. Carpenter Company's store and bought several little kettles. I put in an order for many other things I'd need in the jungle: boots, clothes, food supplies, pots, and I bought a large bottle of Quicksilver Mercury. "What do you want with that?" they asked. "I'll be prospecting," I told them, "and I want to test some samples of what I get out of the ground." I hired 2 native boys. I arranged with my friend, schooner Captain Bowen, operating the Matupi, to take me down coast, a little below Finchhaven Harbor. My 2 boys went with me. We carried guns. Bowen agreed to take me to a river point below Finchhaven Harbor. He would then leave me with a longboat to go up the river with my boys. I was going inland a ways to get a core of the native labor and would walk them back to the coast of Finchhaven Harbor. There the schooner captain would meet us 1 week from then. We'd ship these boys north to Salamaua. The big if, I got the natives lined up. Gambling on losing a week's time, the worst thing I could lose, we reached the river. For a little way, we went with the longboat, and then we had to hike. We carried all the gadgets I bought at the department store. For 3 days, we hacked and slogged our way through the bush country to where some mildly influenced Kanakas, who knew what money was, lived. I reached the settlement I had in mind, without exactly saying, so I let it be understood that I had something to do with the government. I was put up in the Tanhata hut, the rest house that all villages were required to have to put up government people. For the next 2 days, I sounded the village, looked over the place, and observed some very fine young physical specimens. I made myself as popular as I could. I gave them my gun, which was against the law, and let them shoot some pigeons and wild pig, just introducing a little civilization like the missionaries. I became friendly with the Lulawi, the chief. That was my man. He and I had long talks far into the night. On the 3rd night, I allowed him to catch me at a strange rite, a rite which to any ordinary New Guinea eyes and the dim light of a hurricane lamp must have looked like a piece of rare sorcery. I squatted in front of 3 brass pots like a he-witch. Incense burned. It made a fine smell, which I myself liked. The hurricane light was going. I turned it high. The moon was just after the full. 3 days earlier, I had noticed that the tide was nearing the high and the moon was nearing the full. Now, the nighttime, just 1 day after the full moon, for me to do what I wanted. The chief came into my quarters. He listened as I chanted in a low voice some kind of sea-ditty balderdash, lines I picked up at ridding the rods, or starting around poker games, or knocking around with the Woolloomooloo gang in Sydney. They were talking of their shearin' down in Jerry Hogan's bar. He was a small and weedy ship, like big shots mostly are. I glanced briefly at the chief, a little fellow who was watching me with curiosity. I said in pidgin tongue, "Sit down." "Sit down." He crouched. I waved my hands over the pot in which was the quicksilver. The other pot was filled with copper coins the size of half-pennies. On each piece of circular metal was stamped San Francisco Fair. They were souvenirs, to be worn on the coat of anyone who attended the fair, or simply carried away from the exhibition as mementos of the event. They were exactly the size and thickness of half-pennies and shillings. They had found their way to New Guinea, and I had bought up hundreds of them for a few cents. I kept on chanting, glancing worriedly up at the starry, moonless sky. Then up spoke Big Bill Jackson, who smelt of camel dung, and hailed from the wild Morano, where the women eat their young. I drummed out that ditty with a low-pitched cadence. I chanted for a time of Big Bill Jackson and his exploits. Then I said, while stirring the silver, "Muckleher, make clear." I took a handful of the San Francisco Fair copper pieces and put them in the quicksilver pot and stirred them around. I rubbed both thumbs and forefingers on them, and as the silvered coins came out, lo and behold, they were shillings. I carefully placed the new shilling coins on the side and kept minting money and chanting a sheep-shearing song. So Hogan took the tail up of wild and ridgy cuts. How he didn't give a hoot for pizzle or a yard or two of guts. Kooky! The chief's eyes bulged. He muttered, "Moni, Moni!" I hushed him to silence and drew out of my mystic pots a handful of San Francisco coins transformed to bright English shillings, wonderful new values of grace and color. At this moment, I stopped chanting and said, "Pinnis." Finished. "Me took," he said. That meant he wanted to ask questions. "You fella took," I said. He said, "You me mek talata." You and me make friends. What was it? He asked in pidgin tongue. I explained that it was the magic new machine from Sydney for making money. You see with your own eyes. I have made halfpennies into shillings. He could see with his own eyes as he crouched in the faint light of the lamp. He had a shock of fuzzy hair, whitening. His dark-toned skin was wrapped in a native night robe made of glimmering leaf. He was barefooted, about a head and a half shorter than I, and his greedy black eyes glistened as if he saw God. I said it could be done only after the full of the moon, adding in my now pretty good Melanesian lingo, that any other tune he could try as he wanted. It was not worth trying, for he would only destroy the magic and secret formula.